Britt, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jeffrey. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks again for having me.
So let's just jump right in. How do I pronounce your full first name?
My full first name is pronounced Brittram, but there's only a couple people on the planet that call me that, and they're both of my parents. So I really generally go by Britt.
Is that English or?
It is. I'm actually one of those rare people who left the hospital without a name, believe it or not. My parents had picked out a name for a girl, but hadn't really agreed on a name for a boy and loved the name Britt. But also decided that they didn't want to just have me go by Britt. So my father did some research back into his English roots and found Brittram. So that's where it came from. But I generally use Britt, much to their dismay at times.
My youngest daughter, we finalized her name because we were watching the movie Kate and Leopold on the airplane flying to Cambodia to pick her up. So, Kate, it is.
That's how it happens, right? It's sometimes coincidence. Actually, that's how we picked out the name for our youngest daughter, was from the same thing, TV show. So Ainsley from the West Wing back in the day. So anyway, yeah.
And so Britt, you're a different type of guest. You're a proven leader for sure. And you're in our industry for sure, and you're coming at it from a different angle. So introduce yourself to the audience and what you do.
Sure. So I am the CEO of the National Association of Landscape Professionals. And I don't come from the industry, right? I have not been born and raised in landscaping or lawn care. I'm actually more of an association professional. So I've worked with different associations throughout my career. I've worked with big retailers like Walmart, Home Depot, Best Buy, their association. I've worked with food service distributors like Cisco and US Foods and their association. And I've worked with consumer healthcare. So the Johnson & Johnson and Procter & Gamble's of the world. So I've worked in a lot of different industries. I've even started a C6 up, which is a term for a non-for-profit. And then I also did a little work with the American Society of Civil Engineers. And Jeffrey, as I like to say, there's an association for everything. You just have to look around for it. I think we were joking in past conversations, there's an app for that. Well, there's an app for everything, and there's an association for everything as well.
So was coming to the NALP, which is our state or our national, or it's one of a couple national associations. Is that right? There's a couple others out there for nursery.
It's really the only one specifically for landscape and lawn care. There are a lot of state associations that are available for landscape and lawn care. And then there's adjacent associations like the Irrigation Association.
Right.
For our lawn care members who may do pest care, there's a National Pest Care Association. So there's several different adjacent ones.
And there's one or two for snow, right?
Yeah, there's CIMA for snow is the one that I work with most frequently. So but like I said, you can see again how we talk about associations, and there's one for everything. That's why I think you tend to see us be very specific in terms of who we represent and what we do. And I think CIMA does a great job with snow and ice. And even though a lot of our members do snow and ice work, CIMA is a better resource for them for that particular type of work. We're really
there's
about
CIMA, and then there's ASCA. Is it ASCA or?
I've heard of the other one, but again, I'm not as familiar with it. So CIMA is the one that I've spent more time with.
They do great. They both do great jobs with snow. Yeah. So let me just ask you I have a few different questions to ask you.
Sure.
And I think what the audience is going to learn today is they're going to learn about associations, about the landscape world. They're going to learn about leadership, because you are a proven leader, just like anybody who owns a business or even is a leader in the business needs to learn leadership skills. What's your view of the landscape world as an outsider? You have not yet been fully indoctrinated. You're here for what, 2 years now?
I'm going on my third year now. So my anniversary is coming up in October.
What do you love and hate about the landscape world?
Well, it's mostly love, to be honest with you. It's funny because, as I mentioned earlier, I've worked for several different industries. And when you come into an industry, every single one of them likes to tell you how different they are from each other. And what you realize quickly is that there's subtle differences, but not as much. This industry really is different. This industry shares information like nobody I've ever seen. They're all willing to help each other out. It is very, very different from the three core industries that I listed earlier that I worked with. And it's really unique. There's a sense of camaraderie, but there's a sense of caring and a sense of kindness that you don't see in other industries. These folks, and I will tell you, so if you tell me what I don't like about the landscape industry and lawn care, they don't like to sit in classrooms and just learn. They like to talk to each other and learn from each other. And so some of your traditional models of education that maybe I would have used at another association don't work as well here. What you've got to do is give people plenty of time you want to give them information and education, but you want to let them talk, because that's what they really, really enjoy doing. And so it's not something I dislike about them. I've really grown to admire, but it is something that's been challenging. As you know, we have people who are with association backgrounds who are not as familiar with how this industry operates and putting on programming for them. So, but you know, it's been delightful. I've gotten to meet so many great people, and this is the other really unique thing. There's landscapers and lawn care companies everywhere in the U.S. And so as I get out on the road to go see them, it's really an amazing way to see the country as well.
Right.
Yeah. So it's, you know, I don't, it's not one of those things where when I worked for consumer healthcare, I basically was on the corridor, the 95 corridor between New York, and spent a lot of time in New Jersey, because that's where almost all consumer drug manufacturers are. Well, landscapers and lawn care companies are everywhere. And so it's a really great way, but that presents a challenge as well. When we talk about doing education, you know, if we're talking about irrigation, well, it's different when you're talking about California or Arizona versus when you're talking about in Florida. So certainly some challenges there, but it's really what makes this industry fun and unique.
You definitely, we are salt of the earth people.
Yes.
I'm sure you probably have that in other industries too, but not, some of yours are corporate versus, you know, entrepreneurial, our industry here. So you came from, did we use a headhunter to find you? How did we find you?
Yes, we used a headhunter for me. Yeah, so I was part of a national search. So I believe, I don't know how many the overall candidate pool was, but I think they did interviews with 10 of us for the first round and 3 of us for the second round. So, yeah, a group called Hydrick and Struggles, which is based here in Washington, D.C., did the search.
So did you come from a larger company and you took a chance on a smaller industry?
I did.
Or were you stepping up?
I was doing both. So I was part of a larger industry, but I was I was responsible for all the revenue for the association, the Consumer Healthcare Products Association. And so by stepping into this role now, I have responsibility obviously over government affairs, regulatory, et cetera, where there I just had responsibility for all education, all membership, et cetera. So a little bit of a different tune. And I think I really candidly enjoyed it. You know, I'm very grateful that I have Andrew Bray as my government affairs lead. He's fantastic. Yep. And if people don't get to know him, they need to, because he's such a great resource for this industry. But
by the way, just to tell everybody, he puts out a weekly newsletter.
He does put out a weekly, yeah.
And he covers the H-2B and what else does he cover? Everything.
So he'll cover anything that it's dealing, especially if we're dealing with pesticide or fertilizer issues in the States or dealing with the EPA. Yep. H-2B, obviously, gas to electric. All of these things that are kind of coming down and impacting our industry, he keeps everybody up to speed on. So if you're an NALP member and you haven't signed up for that, you need to. And if you're not an NALP member, it is such an incredible resource that I know everybody finds value in.
So I was a member back when the association was called ALCA, which is 20 plus years ago.
Yeah.
And then it I was actually in Hawaii speaking for the tree industry when they were talking about merging way back. And then we merged, we became Planet, then NALP. And so Does any of that history find its way up to what you're currently doing, or is that all just way in
Oh,
the past?
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's that, and I think, a couple phone calls ago between you and I, maybe even over a year ago, I think I talked a little bit about it, but ALCA was the group that represented landscaping, and PLACA was the group that represented lawn care. And they came together on a trade show. And then they formally merged after that. So I think that was in about 2005. ALCA was actually the older organization. They started in the early 60s, and PLACA started in the late 70s. But when they came together in 2005, they did adopt a new name called Planet. And don't ask me to recite all the letters. I cannot remember what exactly Planet stood for, other than I know the keyword was professional. And that was an important thing to the industry. And then, obviously became NALP. And some of the things that we still deal with when you fuse two organizations together in the association world. Oftentimes there's layers of things that are agreeable and things that they they see the value in both working together on, but there's also separations, right? As I was listening to the government affairs topics, H2B, that's not as important for lawn care folks, but the ability to use pesticide and have choices when it comes to the pesticides and fertilizers we use is exceptionally important. Now, that's also important to landscapers, especially the large ones, because they're doing a lot of that as part of their commercial accounts for their customers. But clearly the highest stake in the game for a lawn care company is that ability. And then as we look to gas to electric, it impacts landscaping a little bit more than it impacts lawn care, but ultimately the two can be seen in overlapping. So there is overlap, but there's also some areas where we have to make sure that we're doing a good job of separating out what we're doing and understanding the audience that we're really serving on this.
So what are you excited about for the future for the future in the landscape world, or for what you're going to do in NALP to impact the landscape world?
So I think the biggest thing, the thing that's exciting, but also it's at times slightly intimidating, is sustainability. We are in the process right now of working with a task force to help us define sustainability as well as to create an industry position. Well, why is that important? Well, it's important because we continually have outside groups that define sustainability for us, about us, and we would much rather have it defined by the industry for the industry. And so that's something I'm very excited about in terms of what we'll be working on. And this is this type of thing that associations do that ultimately are designed to help the entire industry. And we also don't want to have everybody having a different definition, right? We want to be able to see if we can all come together and coalesce around a definition that makes sense. I'm excited about that. Certainly, I'm excited about the future of our new annual meeting, Elevate, and watching that grow. Again, I think as we look back in history, Jeffrey, we say these groups came together. Well, they really kind of came together over a trade show as a way to kind of combine forces, and it's a nice revenue generator. And then, as many of us know, the deal was made with working with OPEI and PGMS and created GIE, which was in Louisville every year. And the board of NALP made a decision that they really wanted to start moving around the country again and separate. And so we've taken advantage of that. And I'm excited what the future will become for that. And we are moving. We're in Orlando this year. We'll be in Dallas next year. We'll be in Charlotte the year after that. And we'll be in Phoenix the year after that. So we are trying to set up a more of an east-west movement thing. So that
Are you going to make it to California?
What's that?
Will you make it all the way to California?
We will eventually. In fact, 26 is probably going to be in the Midwest again, in Indianapolis. That's I think we're all but done signing that contract. And then we are looking at Long Beach and LA for 27. So California is definitely on our map, and we want to get out there. But we want to make sure that it can be the right thing. California can be expensive at times, Jeffrey, as I think you know. So, but we continue to look at it, and it's busy. Getting into the San Diego, Los Angeles area is challenging, and San Francisco as well. So we continue to look to be in California, and our goal is to be there in 2027.
Would you ever consider Hawaii or Alaska for that matter?
Well, actually, we're doing our leaders forum in Hawaii this year, and that'll take place February 1st through the 4th. I know that our friends from the National Pest Management Association are actually doing their pest world in Hawaii, not this year, but next year. So I'm going to take some notes from Dominique Strumpf, their CEO, and see whether that's a good workable function or not. Hawaii is a long way to go, as we know, but I think at this point, certainly California is a prime target for us.
It seems to me I'm sort of changing topics here, but in 2008, roughly, associations really struggled, at least in our industry. I think some may have gone out of business or some shrunk. They struggled to find the relevance. You said landscapers want to talk. Well, we don't need an association we don't need to pay dues to talk. We can talk for free around a bar. I'm just, joking here, but, and so is that still an issue I don't know if you can speak for state, but certainly you can speak for NALP. Is that still an issue, finding relevance, paying dues members? And if it's not, how have you solved it, or how have they solved it? And you're there helping.
Well, look, COVID certainly presented us with some challenges because of many instances. Associations will garner revenue streams from meetings, right? And I still think there's a desire to have these annual meetings to gather, and it allows for a central location where everyone can see each other. And they can also see some of the manufacturers that are developing new products for landscapers and lawn care companies to use. I think where we find our relevance, for me, it's still rooted primarily in government relations. We are the only ones who do that for the entire industry. We're the only ones who are out on Capitol Hill and in the state capitals, providing that information for individuals, but also speaking on their behalf. But it also further roots itself in terms of education we provide, certifications that kind of level set the playing field for education. You'll see that we're going to continue to develop certificate programs and ways that we can bring education that brings everyone to, all, as the saying, a rising tide rises all boats. And that's part of the goal here is making this available to folks. We're going to be working on new education for lawn care companies so that they're better able to keep their licenses up to date. And so, it's a lot of these things that the association can provide, but even awards, right? I mean, it's important, and it's a great recognition of the jobs that people do on awards. We provide information on safety. We have an exclusive deal with OSHA to deliver OSHA sessions so that people can keep up to speed on OSHA and ensure that they're able to operate their businesses in a manner that's going to be OSHA compliant. So those are the types of things that we can do that really do make us relevant. Jeffrey, we're going to be looking at developing some economic reports for the industry so that we can really drill down and give our members a sense of not only what's happening, but a peek around the corner to say what's the future. So we'll be looking to develop that in 2023. But there's a lot of different ways that we can do things. And part of the role of an association is to do things for an industry that a single company in that industry can't necessarily always do for themselves. And sometimes that's different, right? But OSHA is a primary example. It doesn't matter how big you are in this industry. Getting an exclusive relationship with OSHA and being able to get that type of level of education is going to be darn near impossible. But they'll work with an association because now OSHA knows that the education will be effectively spread.
Yeah. I don't think people understand everything they can get from their association, state or national. So I'm imagining that, by the way, that's true for you probably have the same problem that landscapers have, which is when a landscape company takes on a new client, the new client sort of gloms onto that initial need and service, and that's all they think that you do.
Mm-hmm.
And I bet you have maybe a similar issue where I signed up with NALP for X, and that's all I think about you is X.
It is. And so one of the ways that we're working to improve ourselves on that. So we've created a system with which we can understand what benefits members are using. So it's really called a participation index. And we outline what people participate in and what they engage in. And so, and we give them a score. And so we know there's 5 kind of layers of scoring. And if you're at the top layer, you're really engaged and you're using everything and you're really finding the full value. And then in the other 2 levels, maybe you're using 3 or 4 or 5 things, but not using everything at this point. And so what we try to do is encourage those folks to open and give them access to those tools to encourage them to check them out. And then we've got the others that are what we would call, the folks that maybe are just paying dues or just as interested in 1 or 2 products as you mentioned. And so what we do with them is continue to try to work on giving them information about more of the resources we have available that they could take advantage of. So that's one way we continually combat it. And I'll tell you, that's a huge challenge for associations. It doesn't matter where you are. And a lot of associations don't measure engagement and how people are taking advantage of their resources. So it was something that was really important to me when I came into NALP. And I have an exceptional individual on staff, Corey Rupel, who has put together a system with which we can now look at this. Jeffrey, we even look at where you are location-wise as we try to figure out what issues are going to be touching you, making sure that if we're on the road, we're going out to see as many people in those particular locations. So there's a lot of ways, but it is a struggle. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It's a challenge for us to ensure that everybody's aware of everything we do and what they can take advantage of, because it is true. You go for one thing, and then how we keep you is by letting you know everything else we do. So it's a similar challenge. And I think you have a perfect example there that you laid out as a landscaper, right?
I think everyone, probably for any company, really, I think it's a big issue. It's an untapped opportunity. In the landscape world, they're so busy answering the phone that they're not spending enough time educating the client once they come in the door on everything they do, which you could make much higher margins on those other things. Do you have an internal metric where you try to get everybody above some minimum threshold, like they're doing at least 3 things within NALP, and therefore we know they're going to stick?
Yeah, what our goal is, and you have to forgive me, there's a lot of detail and scoring behind this, but it's basically, remember I talked about kind of the 5 levels, is really try to get everybody up to at least level 3, right? And level 3 means you're engaged in at least 3 or 4 things. You're attending an event, or you're participating in the certificate program, or you've got something along that line. But also we even measure how much people open their email, right? If you're not opening any emails from us, we're not doing an effective job of communicating with you. And so then that necessitates us picking up the phone or even resorting to good old snail mail to get things going. And so, and Jeffrey, I think the one thing that I would challenge some of the landscapers out there and the lawn care companies to learn from is, really sit back and do an analysis, understand what your customers use and what they don't use, and give them the opportunity to access this. I think it's same for every business. I know when we presented this engagement index to our board, we had a couple of board members go, hey, we need to be doing this at our business, right? And so I think there's an opportunity there to say, hey, we offer 6 or 7 services. Everybody takes advantage of one. We also use it for, Jeffrey, is that when we're going to see a potential member or we're having a conversation with them, we've outlined for their particular dues level what most of their peers take advantage of. So we're able to say to them, hey, companies, that look like you are about the same size. And oh, by the way, geographically somewhat similar, utilize these resources. So
fear of missing out.
Yeah.
Right.
So here's what your the folks who are just like you are using. And here's the opportunity for you to think beyond just using this one thing that you're using. So, and that's an evolutionary process that changes. And really, we've implemented it at least initially for our very, very, so when we're recruiting the top 150, that's but there's differentiations even in the top 150. The top 25 use us very, very differently than 25 through 100, and 100 through 150 use us differently than those other two. So
Yes.
there's a lot of differentiations in there, and I think that type of analysis is helpful to do on your customers.
Maybe Britt, you could teach a course on upselling to your members, and while doing it, actually educate them on everything that NALP does. You could be your own case study and
we could actually. I think that's a great idea, Jeffrey. It's funny. I have been asked by other associations to talk about what we do and how we do it, and we shared it with our state associations even, and so that an offering to them to say, hey, look, this is something we're doing, and we're happy to help you guys in terms of looking at your data and how you might be able to pull this together.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. So in Canada, it's one organization. There's what we would call state, and they call it whatever those
province. Province, yeah, right.
They have the provincial, and they have the national, and it's all connected, and it's one organization. I know we've tried that in the past. Is that never going to happen, or is that something you're thinking about?
It's certainly something we're thinking about. We actually engaged in two separate discussions with Oregon and Washington state associations about looking at that. It is a heavy lift. There's several organizations in the United States that have that down, but in most instances they started out that way. That there was a level of agreement from the very beginning about how the states and nationals will work. There's an organization that many of our members would be familiar with called BOMA.
Sure.
The Building Owners and Managers Association. I actually know their CEO and have gotten to know the organization over the years. They're what's called a true federation model. The locals pay into the state pays into the national. So the national doesn't collect dues from its members per se. It collects it from the states because the states collect the dues, and then the national provides services that the states cannot otherwise provide on their own, specifically federal lobbying and some high levels of education. And certainly for those of folks who are familiar with it, the BOMA National Show. And so that's a really great federation model. There's other models. NPMA, National Pest Management Association. Interestingly enough, they will manage some of their state associations as part of NPMA. So NPMA acts as an association management company, which is what several states have. Anyway, I tell you all that to say we are looking at it. We do know that it's something that needs to be tackled. But I will say the first thing that we've worked on, and again, I'll give Andrew Bray a lot of credit on this. NALP, when I came in, Jeffrey, really needed to improve its relationships with the states. Yeah. And we didn't have as good of relationships as I think a national association should have with state associations that are independent. Yeah. And so we've really tried to make an effort and an emphasis on that and improving those. And I think the model we hope for one day is one that can be collaborative. But you've got some state associations out there that they're kind of great on their own. I mean, Texas, Illinois, Florida with FNGLA and CLCA. There's a bunch out there that are, and I'm not hitting everybody. So if I missed you, states, guys, I'm sorry. But there's a lot of tremendous ones out there. And I think for us, there's an opportunity for us to help some of the state associations that may be looking for additional help. And I think that's the role the association can play. And maybe it even means getting into a management role. It's something we have to explore, Jeffrey, and we have to figure out, and we have to come to an understanding, and we have to make sure that our friends that do run really great state associations feel that the national's supporting them and not getting in their way. And that's the first thing I'll say on a phone call. Hey, I'm not coming to try and butt into your business. I just want to be helpful if we can.
I'm assuming that given the current climate politically of, hey, let's push more authority to the states, that God, what a Herculean task to try to connect everyone together. That sounds like a losing proposition today.
Today, it's a challenge, right? And I think the problem is, I think if everybody was executing at the same level in the states, then that becomes even less of a Herculean task, because now it just becomes more of a consultative arrangement where we can be helpful.
Yeah.
But you know, it's funny, you talk about it shifting power to the states. How about talking about local municipalities, right? I mean, the challenge we have with local municipalities trying to enact local legislation regarding switching from gas to electric. And you know, we come in and say to them, hey, look, folks, we're with you. We want to switch to electric, right? We want to not hear homeowners complain about leaf blowers. And so we think that, but the equipment's just not ready yet.
Yeah.
So give us some time. And but having to send Andrew Bray, I mean, we're fortunate. One of those local municipalities is right across the river here in Montgomery County. But local municipalities getting this authority to enact this type of legislation. First of all, it's not logical. So if one county bans the sale of gas-powered equipment, well, how hard is it to drive into the next county and buy gas-powered equipment? So there's a logic factor to it, but there's also just the factor of, you know, some things at this type of level need to be handled at the very least at a state level, if not at a federal level. One of the things we'll be working on, speaking of federal level, as it relates to the states, is the Farm Bill. So what's the Farm Bill important to our industry for? Well, it's important because it regulates the use of fertilizers and pesticides. We continue to seek federal preemption so that the EP, so we have one source of truth as opposed to 50 sources of truth that exist out there. So we do always seek preemption. And what I mean by preemption is allowing a larger authority, a singular larger authority, to make policy that can govern the rest of the smaller authorities. We think that's important in states, and in certain instances, we think it's very important federally.
You know, I was on vacation in Spain, Madrid, and Portugal this summer, and Portugal was under an extreme drought. The vineyards there are similar to parts of Italy where it's non-irrigated, you know, and I guess the roots go 30 feet or maybe more deep.
Yeah.
It was 100 degrees. It was dry. It was drought. You know, you're reading in the news now about the Rhine River drying up and boats, a lot of commerce grinding almost to a halt.
Yeah.
It is just crazy. And so how are, and that's, and you don't really have, you know, that's impacting us. It's hard for us to impact it. How are you guys talking about that or thinking about water at NALP?
So we, you know, it's interesting, and this goes back to the fact that we're a national association that represents various climate regions with just in the United States. And so as we think about our friends out west and the drought that they're experiencing, yet we represent states like Florida, Southeast, even Virginia. We're not experiencing a drought. Actually, we're experiencing a really kind of a very wet year, so to speak. But then you even go to our friends up north in Massachusetts and Cape Cod, and they're in a drought. So for us, it's always about the responsible use. And I think this is the one thing that we've got to do a better job on as an industry and as a community, is really explaining to the public that we are interested in very efficient uses, because inefficiency in our industry costs us money and puts us out of business. So if we talk about fertilizers and pesticides, we're not excessively putting fertilizer. We're putting down exactly the right amount to do the job, because, oh, by the way, those fertilizers and those pesticides are expensive. It's the same thing with irrigation. If we put in smart irrigation, we want to conserve the water so that we're not overwatering. And many consumers will overwater if they just, you know, if they go out there and leave their sprinkler on, they forget to turn it off, right? Guess what happens? You got a flooded lawn. So for us, it's about responsible use. It's about ensuring that we can keep the landscape healthy, and that we can, you know, ensure doing so with the use of the least amount of natural resources.
I mean, I'm sure IA Irrigation Association is, you know, that's, I mean, obviously they deal with it all the time. It's their bread and butter. And in some states, these water issues makes irrigation more lucrative. But I'm also thinking NALP has got to be sort of dealing with this or collaborating with the Irrigation Association to, I don't know, bring in IP into NALP, or how are you guys dealing with it in that sense?
So Natasha Rankin, who's the new CEO over at Irrigation Association, she and I talk about once every 2 months. And we are looking at ways that we can be more collaborative with each other. Irrigation Association is interesting. They represent more the manufacturers of irrigation and irrigation supplies. And so they have a group, they have an audience that also does agriculture, right? So irrigating agriculture is very different than irrigating residential and commercial properties. But there's a portion of their organization that represents those folks as well. So we try to work together. Obviously, our role is on the commercial and residential side of things. We're not concerned about ag, and ag is a whole different ballgame because agriculture in the United States has such a powerful influence that, you know, we represent kind of what I would say the margin. Right. And that's why we can sometimes get attacked on certain instances, and it's necessary for us to be better able to defend us. But no, Irrigation Association, let's talk to it. What's that?
Same in the landscape architecture world. There's landscape architecture, and then residential is tiny.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it was funny. I was just out with Jeff Berghoff, who's out in Phoenix. And they're hopefully going to be joining the association soon. But to look at, he's got he's one of the few that I've seen has a staff full of, he's got 5 or 6 landscape architects on there. But it is such a small portion of what landscape architects do. And I think, but Natasha, just so you know, she will be at Elevate. She's coming to Elevate. I invite all of the sister associations, if you will, to come and join us. National Pest Management will be there. The CEO for RISE, and RISE represents the manufacturers of fertilizers and pesticides. She'll be there. So, we try to make sure that our industry gets exposed to these other organizations as well, and that they understand where we're coming from and have the opportunity to talk to our members.
Well, so you really have both a defensive responsibility and an offensive responsibility. And there's so much change happening that the offensive part has to really, you've got to sort of grapple with that. I was just listening to a podcast that there's 3 big trends that will be deflationary on our macroeconomic world upcoming. And I'm trying to remember, as you're talking, I'm trying to remember what they are. So one is AI will have a deflationary and therefore transformational impact on our world. One is battery power. And I think the third was alternative energy. I have to go back and listen to it. But all 3 would have a deflationary impact, but therefore a transformational impact. And so some of that stuff is science fiction, and some of it's happening right now, and it's really all a combination.
It is. And so I think what people also, but what we try to do, as we talk about battery transformation, the reason why we talk about time is that, so California has enacted a regulatory, they put in place some legislation that then the regulatory body now is responsible for carrying out. And that basically is that they're no longer going to allow the sale of gas equipment after 2024. And here's the problem with that. I think if you look in the news, you see that California regularly has rolling blackouts. Now, if I have to install enough power into my landscape business, so that means no longer are you dealing with your regular outlets to charge this stuff. You've got to drop 220 lines in, right? Yeah. And you probably have to drop 4 or 5 of those. Well, first of all, California's electric service cannot be provided at that scope and at that level. Secondarily, Jeffrey, what are landscapers going to do when their equipment doesn't charge overnight because there was a rolling blackout and they're not going to work?
Didn't California just outlaw gasoline cars as of 2035?
Yeah.
I think this morning.
Yeah, but I understand their perspective. They are aggressively seeking to influence.
Now we're getting into politics. What you're saying is we're going to need not only to get internet throughout the whole country, which we still don't have, but we're going to need to revamp our entire grid. We're going to revamp our grid. And oh, by the way, the alternative power that we're going to need to make that grid work is not ready yet either, right? So we're still not hitting our goals with wind or with solar. Yeah. While they're becoming more efficient and they're becoming more practical, they still can't carry the day. And so I think
we need to sit back for a second and realistically look at what do we need to do as a country to get the grid to a point where it can handle getting rid of fossil fuels. And
I didn't mean to take us off track on this.
No, it's fine. Yeah, no, but we deal. That's Jeffrey. That's why this sustainability and us defining sustainability and us having a stake, so we can begin to play. As you going back to your offense defense analysis. Yeah, playing defense stinks. And associations regularly play defense, and it's not that we're afraid to do it. We do it regularly. You know, whenever we get attacked, you know, I've had 2 now letters to the editor published in the New York Times when we've had different articles attacking us specifically on tearing your lawns out or how bad lawns are for America. It's unsubstantiated claims that they, you know, why do they get to publish an article that has absolutely no sources, no research, no nothing? But if we want to respond, we have to cite sources. We have to follow the rules, and they don't. And so that's why it's important to play offense, because playing defense, sometimes you're playing on a very uneven playing field. But if you're playing offense, and that's what we're trying to do, and we have a digital advocacy platform called Voices for Healthy Green Spaces. And what we're trying to do with Voices with Healthy Green Spaces is get our collective community surrounding the fact that there are people out there who love their lawns, who know what a great thing our industry does for this planet, and helping to sequester carbon and do all the things that are very positive for this planet. And by building those resources, not only are we going to get our companies and our members and their employees engaged in Voices for Healthy Green Spaces, but we want to get their customers engaged too. Hey, I love look, Jeffrey, I was probably one of the single largest polluters of the Chesapeake Bay prior to getting this job and having a professional do it for me, because I didn't understand how to put down fertilizer. I got a bag of it. I wheeled it around. I know the directions said just to do that, but that didn't really feel like enough. So let me put some more down, right? You know, and I think that's what we're trying to talk to people about, is that, look, you've got these former Britt Woods out there who are polluting the environment. By having professionals do it, we're going to do it right. We're going to get the exact amount in. And so, yes, offense is exceptionally important, and we've got to get better at it. We're still going to have to play defense, but offense has got to get better. Did you show up and analyze the association and say, hey, we were 10% offense? I'm just making this up. 90% defense, and we need to make a shift. Is that what was your view, and where are you trying to take it? So we were 100% defense. Yeah. And I, you know, for anybody who's a football team knows, it doesn't matter how great your defense is, you got to score a touchdown every once in a while. And so, yeah, we had to start playing offense. I'm very fortunate. I think Andrew Bray and also my head of marketing and public relations, Lisa Stryker, are both folks who get playing offense and have really continued to push. And you know, I think the 3 of us combined really are focused in on this. We really want to play some offense with sustainability. We're trying to play more offense with Lawn Care Month. And you're going to see new things that we're going to be doing for the industry down the road that, you know, still have some time for development, that's going to allow us to play offense. And oh, by the way, it's not just us playing offense, it's us giving this information and ensuring our state's partners also have the opportunity to do it. And it's ensuring that our members know how to do it. Yeah. Many people listening are involved or thinking about being involved in the state associations. Any tips you would give them to help them do that? So, you know, first and foremost, I think it is important to get involved in your state association. And I think, you know, one of the things that's important for folks to know, whether it's a state or a national association, Jeffrey, is that at the end of the day, you'll see an individual like me and you think I'm the association, and I'm not. You, Jeffrey, are the association. Mike Bogan is the association. You know, Brandon Shepard's the association. All the people who are in the industry, they make up the association. It's what makes associations unique, is that at the end of the day, I make a lot of personnel decisions. I support, I bring strategic issues to the board. I do all these things. I don't make any decisions. I really don't. And I think it's interesting when you see people from industry who try to jump in and become heads of associations. They're challenged by it, because at the end of the day, I don't get to say my view of what the landscape industry should do or shouldn't do is necessarily correct. I have to get the industry as a whole and the members, because look, the last person who held this job is gone, and one day I'll be gone too. But the industry will still be here, and all the components that make up the industry. So I realize that's kind of a very long worded way of saying, hey, get involved and get engaged. At a certain point, people think about the dues, and I would say, think about what you might get from it. If you get one great idea, if you can help avoid one piece of bad legislation, if you can positively influence someone's view of our industry, that's worth it. And so, I think to a certain extent, I'm not saying ignore what the dues are. And certainly we want you to get value for your money, but understand at the end of the day, what you get from an association is what you're willing to put into it. I've had conversations with organizations that have said, look, I'll join, but I just don't know whether I really have the time to do it. And I said, well, then don't join. Don't waste your money. I mean, but think about time, and think about how you're using your time, and think about what engagement means. And I think it's the same thing for your clients, Jeffrey. I think you experience a similar thing, right? If they don't put in the time to work with you,
right,
then what are they going to get? They're going to get a negative experience in their minds, even though they have to appreciate that really what this requires is putting in the time.
Yeah.
So I would say that first of all, the biggest thing is just figure out who your state association is. If you don't know, send us a note. NALP will be happy. We can tell every state, we know every state association that exists out there. And there are some states like New Mexico don't have a state association, but we'll connect you with an adjacent one where, they'll be able to give you some help as well. But get engaged, see what they have to offer. And oh, by the way, offer up your ideas, because in many instances, associations are happy to execute and create new value propositions for you, if we know about them. And we try to seek those out, and we try to develop those without being told. But in certain instances, the best ideas come from members.
Yeah. Okay. What about somebody who's in leadership? And let's say they're already involved in leadership in a state association. Shine some of your experience and wisdom on us here, Britt. Any tips for someone who's making their way up through the association, just like you've done, though you did it on the professional side?
Yeah, engagement is the first thing, right? It's raise your hand, right? So, and once you've raised your hand, the biggest thing you have to do as a leader in an association space in the industry, you've got to be able to take your company hat off and put your industry, and that's hard.
Yeah.
Not everybody can do that.
Yeah.
And if there's one piece of advice I give to everybody who says, oh, I'd like to be on the board, or I'd like to get more involved and everything like that, I said, look, we'd love to have you more involved. We want more ideas. But you have to put your industry hat on. And once you put your industry hat on, don't be afraid to speak up. If you're a smaller company and you get into a room with a bunch of bigger companies and you think you don't have anything to contribute, you're wrong. Yeah. You absolutely have something to contribute. It doesn't matter how big you are. Right. What matters is your brain and assessing a need and expressing an opinion. We try to really do a good job with the NALP board to ensure that it's got a balance of companies on it, because there's a lot of industries where it's just the really big companies. Right. I mean, when I was with the retail organization, it was just all the massive ones. You basically had to be 5 billion or bigger as a business to join our association. So that was very limiting. But this industry is not like that. And our board is not like that. And neither are the state boards. So, look, have the ability to put your industry hat on and raise your hand and participate, and don't get intimidated by people in the room. You've got to be willing to share your opinion.
Easier said than done, at least initially, for sure.
It is. And I think it's our role as association. This is part of where the association executive can be very helpful, is ensuring that we give, new board members or people interested in that they understand the issues, that they're well educated, they're well versed, they feel comfortable. But it's also in continually encouraging them to participate. And so one of the things that I make a point of doing is when we're having open discussions, I'll call on people who are new and put them in a position where they need to share their opinion, so that, because I've got a few folks that would love to dominate a meeting if they could, but that's necessary for us to do that. But it's not easy. And so, I think, Jeffrey, by asking the question, my sense is that leaders out there that would like to get involved, but that's what comes with it. And I think understanding that before you get into it can make it a little easier.
Yeah. Okay. We're out of time here, but let me ask you one last question, Britt, or what was it? Brittram?
Brittram, yes.
Brittram. Yeah. Give us a prediction for the future in the landscape world, lawn, landscape, irrigation, lighting, the green industry.
So I think where the green industry will go is that we will do a better job of expressing to people the role we play in society, and for the environment as a whole. My prediction is one day Andrew Bray and his team will in fact resolve the H2B issue.
Yay!
That's a prediction, but I do feel like
for the better, you're saying
we're making some necessary steps, and that will help us resolve some of our employment issues. And I'm excited about that. I think the future will be electric powered. I think anyone who doesn't think so has got their head in a hole, and they need to pull it out and say, hey, I need to understand what's going on with electric and battery powered. Yeah. And I need to start thinking about how my business is going to change to adopt that. Yeah. I think we're going to continue to deal with restrictions. But know that NALP is out there continuing to try and fight the fight so that we can be recognized as the responsible caregivers of the environment and not the individuals that are doing its harm. So, I think we're going to see a lot of those little robotic mowers running around people's front yards, Jeffrey. And I think that's going to change the industry because, there's a portion of our industry that is known as mow and blow, and those folks, if the proliferation and the technology continue to improve on those robot mowers, a lot of that business is going to dry up. And I think that may also expand our employment pool, but it forces us to ensure that we are more professional in nature. And so I would say that I believe this industry will continue to become more and more and more professional, and become more and more respected as a result.
Well, I was saying that AI, battery power, alternative energy will have deflationary impacts. That means service costs in theory will go down. We'll see how that plays out.
We will see how that plays out, and that I think could certainly be the case. As I said, with the robotic mowers, that may put a sector of our industry in a problematic situation. They're either going to have to evolve and develop the services that they're doing, yes. Yep. or they will be out of business. And so, but I know the really professional folks, the folks that are really studying this and really understanding it and are aware of it, are going to be fine. And this industry is going to continue to thrive, and we're going to do things, new and better things. I think you've seen kind of in my past, dealing with self-checkout, right, at retailers. That was going to put everybody out of business, right? I mean, not everybody out of business. It was going to put a lot of people out of work because now you didn't need these checkers. Yeah. Well, what we found is that there's a hybrid system, right? And it's going to be in place. And you had to be a smart retailer to figure out how you were going to address that and how consumers were going to adapt to it. I feel like landscapers and lawn care companies are going to be the same thing.
Apparently, it was an innovation 100 years ago to put a price on the product in the grocery store.
Right.
So, you think your industry will never change, but it's always changing. Just look at retail.
Yeah.
That was the innovation 100 years ago or whatever.
Yep.
And innovation is, it hits everywhere. It's hitting us, and we're really at the beginning of it.
We are. And I think that's where, people have to make sure that they keep their eyes open and that they are getting out and seeing the latest and greatest stuff, and that they understand how and think about how that's going to change, right? Let's even talk about that. Many of the people that are just in the mow and blow business are not thinking about the impact of these mowers, right? And you need to be thinking about the impact of these mowers. because a lot of the people that can afford the mowers are the same people that are willing to pay to have their lawns cut. And so how's your business going to change and be impacted by that? And I know some of the people that do a lot of work in terms of mowing residential lawns, and they do really well, are already thinking about this. How is this going to change? But we've got lawn care companies that are also thinking about it, because if you're a lawn care company and now you know that the lawn is going to be treated, mowed, and this the exact way that you would like to see it mowed, now that gives you the ability to potentially reduce some of the fertilizers and pesticides that you're putting down. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be fun to watch it develop, but people really do have to keep their heads on about it.
It's going to be disruptive, and also with all this climate change happening, and when will lawns be outlawed in certain states or counties or regions?
Well, I think that will be interesting. And I think there's a good argument there. And it's going to be a fight to fight. But, let's talk about, if you rip your lawn out, what happens to the water when it lands on dirt? Well, it runs off.
Yeah. I'm not advocating for one.
I know you're not. Yeah. But that's where we're not, it can't just be NALP. It's got to be everybody getting out and saying, hey, yes, there's this part. You're thinking about one aspect of what grass does, but here's the thing: when you take the grass away, what's going to happen, right? And so I think that that's going to be a fight to fight. Yes, you're right. It is definitely going to be a fight. And I mean, in Nevada, they're already tearing grass out, right? You're not allowed to have grass on, in the middle of highways and roads, and so they're tearing all of that out. But I don't know whether you saw the rains in Las Vegas. When you get a heavy rain, what happens with the water?
It runs off.
It's not being filtered.
It's been raining every day here for the past 3 weeks. It's like a mini flood every single day right outside my window here. So it's crazy.
It is. So, I mean, these are all things that I think we need to make. We have to continue to beat the drum, and the industry has to continue to beat the drum. And that, Jeffrey, another thing that I'll tell you will be commonplace in a few years is the ability for a landscaper to go to one of their customers, or a lawn care company to go to one of their customers and say, hey, I want you to follow this link and type in your address. And now you're going to see exactly how much carbon your lawn and landscape sequester. And you'll also be able to say the person down the street who doesn't have these services and how much less they're sequestering. So we know that technology is actually currently in development. And it's a resource that we're going to make sure is available to all of our members, and so that they can have the opportunity to utilize that and show people what they're doing.
Yeah. Interesting what you said about the highways, how they're outlawing lawn. Isn't it the highway industry with Eisenhower that sort of brought the whole nursery industry to life, because we had to plant all the highways that we built?
Right. And so, but it's those dividers, right, in between 4 or 5 lane roads where we put grass in, and we put grass in because grass doesn't grow so high that it impedes our ability to see what's around us and be safe. And so, it's all these things, but you're right. Eisenhower did come up with it. He helped proliferate the industry, and at the end of the day, we'll see how this evolution continues to take place and to grow.
So last question here. Do you think we should plant 1 million trees or whatever that is? And should NALP be involved?
Well, I think it's certainly a discussion. We've talked to the tree care industry folks about, that and how we do that. And I think, I know enough about that, Jeffrey, to be dangerous, but not enough to really give you a great answer. Yeah. I certainly think it's on our radar. And I certainly think there's a role for us to play in it. And I think there's an opportunity for us, especially in urban environments, to create better canopy. Because if you look at the heat indexes in urban environments and the lack of trees, especially in poorer neighborhoods, I think there's a role that NALP could play there. And we'll certainly work with the Tree Care Industry Association and Dave White over there, and make sure that we're dialed in and see how we can help. But there's tremendous opportunity. I think it's just a matter of figuring out what's the best way to go about it.
Yeah, exactly. Priority, and what's actually going to get traction politically and culturally, and get on the bandwagon.
Yep, absolutely.
Britt, this has been excellent. I appreciate your time and getting to know you better. Thank you for sharing with everybody here.
Jeffrey, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I love chatting with you, and I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of your podcast. So thank you.